So since I was 20, people ask, what religion are you? I always say I'm the same religion God is. And that's the key. Because how can I say, you've been Buddhist, you've been Hindu, you've been Islamic, you've been all the religions and then those that went prior to those. So people don't understand. And what we have to realize is all paths lead to the one. You're on the correct path that you chose. You can't berate somebody for being on their path. Let them choose on a spiritual level. But what people don't recognize is on a spiritual level, you promise to build a one-on-one relationship with the divine, God, creator, source, force, all there is, the great I am. So that's the problem. People are not just on Sundays or Shabbat or Saturday, but throughout every day, you're supposed to keep it as an alignment to the one, or God creator.
Hello, my dear friends. I'm Donald Lee, and this is Expressing and Revealing Your Truth with Donald Lee. It's a podcast where I help you understand the truth about who you really are and how you can express and reveal that truth in the world. To do that, I interview people who have had transformational spiritual experiences, the type of experiences that many of us wish we had, but never do. Yet, by learning from my guests' experiences and the wisdom they've gained from those experiences, all of us can glimpse a bigger vision of who we really are and how we can live our lives more fully, more peacefully, more lovingly. Be sure to download my free mini ebook containing 5 of the 50 parables from my popular book, The Band Director's Lessons About Life. These little parables are short, easy to read, inspiring, and also help you to understand more about who you really are. There is a link in the show notes to get you a free ebook. In this episode, I interview Antonia Lau. I first met Antonia several years ago, and we have since become good friends. She is an amazing psychic and a beautiful soul. Antonia was born with what we call psychic gifts, but she's also worked very hard to develop them. As a child and teenager, she read spiritual and metaphysical books voraciously. She started doing readings for people even in adolescence. Among other things, she has the ability to see fourth and fifth dimensional beings. We cover a wide range of topics, and I'm sure you will enjoy this wonderful conversation with Antonia Lau. Hello, my dear friends. We're here with Antonia Lau. Now, Antonia Lau is an amazing person whom I met several years ago through an Edgar Cayce Search for God group, an online study group. So we have since got to know each other a little bit better. And ever since I started the podcast, Antonia Lau has been right near the top of my list for people I wanted to interview. So we have her here today. Welcome, Antonia.
Thank you so much for having me, Donald.
It's my pleasure and my honor indeed, Antonia. Now, Antonia is a very famous person, unlike me, and she spent most of her life in Los Angeles, but I'm going to let her tell you about it. She has had many important spiritual turning points or spiritual events in her life, but she was born with some spiritual gifts, unlike many of us, or at least most of us, are unaware of our spiritual gifts or haven't developed them. But Antonia, we're anxious to hear your story of spiritual unfoldment. So take it away. But I've got to ask you, particularly for the benefit of those who are watching on YouTube, the question that will be on everybody's mind, because it was on my mind, and me not having as good a manners as many people actually asked the question. So I'm going to ask you to explain to everybody, you have such a unique combination of facial features that I had to ask you early on when we met in person what your ethnic background was. And it's also relevant because it's kind of like a microcosm of the world at large, or an example to the world at large of where we need to go and where we are going. Tell us, first of all, before your spiritual enlightenment story, about your ethnic background, which is fascinating in itself.
Well, surely, people may not know, but it's confirmed, and I won't say or espouse anything that's not confirmed because we already full of misconceptions and misinformation. But first of all, yes, this life I am human, and how can I say it? A product of miscegenation. Now, I didn't recognize what that was until a dear friend from Gibraltar who had first met me in Hollywood area. We were in line waiting for a show to begin. An older lady, very genteel, and she said, "What is your mixture? Dear, don't you know about miscegenation?" It was her name was Flora. A dear, she's no longer with us. But the point was, from Europe, they understand that when the ethnic changes happen or the blends happen, all the recessive genes go to the background and the predominant genes come to the forefront. So she said, it means most intelligent. Well, I didn't care about all that. That was kind of her to say and state it. But I was always proud of the fact that in my family lineage, there was no discrimination whatsoever, which is, I believe, the world has to come to. So,
Right.
my father, came from China. I have an older half brother that was Chinese as well, and my mother's father came from is Spanish. Her mother's father was German. Her mother's father was Irish and Cherokee, and her mother all the way back to Hawaii were Irish and Cherokee. So the blends have been happening for my generations for now nearly 5 generations. And so I learned from that that there is only a responsibility on a soul level to who you partner with. That's the true reason. The soul calls. And so, since I had learned later in life that we have been every ethnicity, each nationality, and each religion in most past lives, it behooves all to recognize that the we're all one. It's as if you had flowers in the field. If they were all red, you'd be kind of bored. Oh, red flowers again. So we have these beautiful individual qualities that bring out the best to teach us that we are all one humankind, and that oneness should prevail all the way to the divine. Despite our supposed differences, there are not really. Even in spiritual, how can I say it, evolution, there are some that are just in the first base, some are in second and third and fourth. But remember when you were in first base and treat those accordingly in the highest ways because you were once there. And of course, there's some that are, how can I say it, in that space of the ninth and 10th range. And what we want to do is aspire and be inspired by those in that spiritual level. But for me, growing up, I was raised with an academic based family that didn't believe or didn't mention anything about spirituality. It wasn't discussed, except you went to church. They went only to church on, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day. That's it for them. But I had to go after an experience I had from 5 years on. Always. I had to get there. And I went to a community church that was non denominational. Again, be speaking, all faiths are respected, not just one. But yes, my mother would run in times of crises to light a novena at St. Jude if she needed. But I had an older half sister that had her wedding at high mass, with 3 nuns in attendance, the whole shot. But it's important to understand that where we come from is not the basis. It's who we are on a spiritual level, on a soul level, how we come, what we plan to improve on a soul level, and the soul growth. Unfortunately, it's not been taught in our society for a number of centuries, well, actually, millennia. So
Yeah.
we promise the divine to find out what that base is. And so as a child, these things were happening. I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, could see, could hear, and I had this interest in the subject. And I was because of it was an academic based family. We were reading at 2 years old. Readers at six, how to say it, 6 year old would read, and then it progressed. But I had a library card, and so at 7, I started going avidly to the library. I loved that. But at 9, I thought, wait a minute, I don't have to go to the kids section. So I started going to the adult section for esoteric sciences and metaphysical studies and parapsychology. It was amazing because I love that material. I used to read a book a week. Now it's probably 17 at a time by the nightstand, but I'm, literally divinely guided to the material because there's a lot of garbage out there, unfortunately. So we
Mhm.
find that this time and day, there's a lot of misinformation as people are open to their spirituality. So it's kind of good couple minutes of good information, then a full bore of misinformation at the same time. So there have to be, they have to learn to open their discernment on a soul level to discriminate and disseminate all that material to see what's real and what's garbage. Because there's a lot of the
Right.
garbage out there, right, especially some of the trendy phases. So as a child, when these things would come up, I would know things that would happen, phone, who was gonna be at the door, that sort of thing. I'd have a dream and then I'd wake up that next day and all of a sudden there was a phone call and they would be discussing what I had been shown in the dream. And when, the phone would ring, I'd tell my mother, "The phone's going to ring." And we had a specialized way to speak, the one phone you had in the house at the time. "I'm sorry, no one's here right now. May I take a message?" That kinda thing. But I would tell her who was gonna call and that the phone was gonna ring, and she'd just look and stare and her mouth would drop. She could never talk or discuss it with me. So ultimately, she ended up marrying a gentleman later, when I was, I guess 12 or 13. By then I was reading and an avid reader of everything I could get on metaphysical studies and doing telekinesis and things like that. But he had an interest in spirituality, which was amazing. And so when he saw me doing the telekinesis, he recognized or saw, and he had me do it with the, again with the needle and all that good stuff. But the point was he inspired or encouraged. That was the only one in my life at that time that encouraged that. I had a deep love for God that never has left. That should always stay in place. But this was the extra qualities and layers of spiritual quality that God intended for humankind when they are ready. So we must be patient with everybody at their level. And you mentioned earlier about the fame portion, and I always say, it's all relative. It's not about who you are at the end, it's how you are along the path. So, yes, I've had 4 television development deals, my own radio shows that were award winning radio shows since the 80s. And the whole point was to deliver information. To me, it's not the fame and the fortune. It's if you can dispense information that inspires the collective. It's always been my focus. So to me, that is the most important thing. It's a point to educate the population for those who may resonate. So there's no opinions on my shows, no extrapolations. I try to get rid of the myths and misconceptions of societal belief systems so we can kind of veer back on the path that's more correct for humankind's evolution. That's the key. And so it doesn't matter if you and I make it spiritually or keep advancing our soul growth. Everybody we see at Walmart has to make it. Those are our
Yeah.
brothers and sisters that in fact, not even Walmart, around the world are our brothers and sisters that we promise to inspire by watching us, not commanding, not
Yeah.
lauding over them, but by watching our example and shining that out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it reminded me of the Edgar Casey said something like, you won't get to heaven except by holding the hand of someone else that you helped to get there.
Others, yes, he would say, "Others, Lord, others." We always have to think of others, but we have
Yeah.
to keep improving ourselves to the last draw of breath. But
Yeah. So that we can be a help to others.
exactly. There's one thing that I find is still to this very day, after all the studies and classes and lectures and TV shows and radio shows and all that I've done, what's interesting is there's one thing that I noticed that humankind hasn't quite understood yet. And I'm thinking, when is that day that the 100th monkey will get it? Yeah, I'm just so the big thing is this: people don't understand what you think, what you say, all your actions are actually recorded in your book of life or your Akashic record, which Casey brought that word into the being. But it's recorded for every life, not just this one. And so on this planet, under divine universal law, you reap what you sow. So I cannot understand. I'm looking at them, realizing when they do or say something to someone, they don't know that they're actually doing to them. It's like,
Yes.
anger doesn't poison the other person, it poisons you. So
Yeah.
it's like drinking your own poison. Well, so they have to
Yeah.
learn that development, that what they're doing, they're actually doing to themselves. That's the
Yeah.
hardest thing for me to see still.
Yeah. And Jesus said this in many ways. So several of the sayings
Thanks
of
for
Jesus
Jesus
came
came
to mind as you were talking. And one is when he was criticized by the Pharisees for not washing his hands before he ate, and he said, "It's not what goes into your mouth that contaminates you; it's what comes out of your mouth that contaminates you."
Excellent. And we know the Pharisees and the Sadducees argue constantly. One taught reincarnation, the other didn't. Jesus taught reincarnation to all the disciples. And of course, that was removed from our current King James Bible version in 549 AD, sadly. They thought they couldn't control the population if they knew that they could return any time. But
Yeah.
it's
There was lots of things. We have looked at the Roman Emperor Constantine as the savior of Christianity because he ended the persecutions of the Christians and he eventually made not Christianity legal. And then later he made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. And we think, oh, he saved Christianity. But actually, what people forget, he was not a religious person. He
a
was a
politician.
general, first of all, right? Commander of armies,
Yeah,
and he was Caesar.
yes,
So what he was concerned, rulers always are fundamentally concerned with power and control.
that's right.
And so what he wanted is that the old Roman religion had lost its power over the people because so many people didn't believe in it anymore. And it was no longer a unifying force in the empire, which was very disunified. And so he wanted a religion that would be a unifying force, that would be essentially an adjunct of power. And so, yeah, Constantine turned Christianity from a religion, seeking for spiritual truth into a tool of power. And unfortunately, it has been very much that ever since the time of Constantine.
And people don't realize Christianity as a religion didn't come to the fore till 50 years after the crucifixion and the resurrection.
Yeah.
50 years after did it become religion. So it's kind of a sad state. But on the point of religion, you see, man invented 35,000 religions throughout time. That's the problem. God did not. So since I was 20, people ask, "What religion are you?" I always say, "I'm the same religion God is." And that's the key
Yeah, that's good.
because
That's good.
how can I say, you've been Buddhist, you've been Hindu, you've been Islamic, you've been all the religions that, and then those that went prior to those. So people don't understand. And what we have to realize is all paths lead to the one. It's you're on the correct path that you chose. You can't berate somebody for being on their path. Let them choose on a spiritual level. But what people don't recognize is on a spiritual level, you promise to build a one on one relationship with the divine, God, creator, source, force, all there is, the great I am. So that's the problem. People are not just on Sundays or Shabbat or Saturday, but throughout every day, you're supposed to keep it as an alignment to the one or God creator. And so I believe the miscegenation in my life came from letting people know, excuse me, all are one. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. But I want to see the height of humankind come to its highest point of spiritual awareness. That's key. And we can see that transforming now. More people are not afraid to say the word God. A couple of decades ago, you couldn't say it because it wasn't cool. And so I always did, you know. But the point was to remind people, you mean God? You mean you want to be grateful? But that kind of thing. But you see it now in the younger generations once again. So it's nice to see it feel fulfilling. They're looking for that connection. But you know what's interesting is, and people may not realize, Casey was in depth with what he did in his readings. He was a
Yes.
devout Christian mystic that read that Bible since he was 9 years old every year of his life.
Yeah.
And all he wanted to do was be a Sunday school teacher. That's how strong. And so after 20 years of doing the medical readings that he was he'd be induced into a trance state, these doctors couldn't understand how he did this. So they asked in a consortium for him to come, and what they did, unfortunately, was that small consortium, I think it was in New York or Dayton, Ohio, what they ended up doing was while he was in deep state of trance, giving a reading about the health of someone and diagnosing it perfectly, one doctor that didn't believe walked up, pulled a pocket knife out of his hand, out of his pocket, and peeled off one of Casey's fingernails, stuck needles in his hand and in his cheek. Casey didn't move. Casey continued in the reading. Casey didn't stir out of that deep and hypnotic trance. So he realized, oh, this must be real. And people don't realize the archangelic realm spoke through Casey, not just some discarnate spirit out there. And so it
Yeah.
was to help humankind evolve in the true path. And so the organization vowed never to let that happen to Casey again. But what I love about Casey's work was after 30 years of doing readings, they went from the medical to also the life readings. They finally told the archangelic realm came through him in a reading that was transcribed. He's the most documented seer of the 20th century. And
Yeah.
so they finally told him that he wrote the book of Luke and part of the book of Acts. And they said, we didn't want to tell this entity earlier because we knew it would go to his head. So I
It would it would go to anybody's head, wouldn't it? I'm a gospel writer, man. I wrote the gospel.
exactly. So I thought that
So
was
that's interesting. That's one aspect of your Casey that I was not aware of,
yes,
Antonia.
yes.
So was he Luke or the name that got assigned to that
Luke.
gospel, the Gospel of Luke and Acts, because they both claim to have been written by a guy named Luke who calls himself a physician, right, a medical doctor, and claims also says, particularly at the beginning of Acts, that he was writing for, you're writing this down for a man with a Greek name. What was the name? Do you remember?
I don't. I'm so sorry. But it certainly wasn't Herod. But the point the point
Oh no, 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 no.
no, that's way
No, no, he was it was a Greek name. But interesting. So this name of Luke that we have associated with Acts and the Gospel of Luke, that's not who wrote
no.
it. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's actually Lucien, and that's spelling Lucien of such and such, and I can't remember the last placement of it. But I was laughing so
Okay,
heartily at the fact that he actually wrote it and they saved it for 30 years of his service to others, helping others in their lives on a spiritual level. They wouldn't even tell him. Again, because we know the human ego gets in the way. So we have to get
right,
rid of
right.
ego to go toward the heart level to keep connected and aligned to God Creator in all that we do on a daily basis, not just once in a blue. So,
Yeah,
what people
yeah.
don't understand as well, go ahead. You were going to ask, or
I was going to say if his name was Lucian, which sounds like a Roman name,
in
I
of
can see
something,
that Luke as sort of an anglicization of that Roman name. Maybe that's how it came about, something like that.
and then
But
Saint Luke
but
added.
you were yeah, you we were hearing your story. We got off into general things, which is great,
Sure, sure.
but we were at the point in your life and spiritual development where you're a teenager
Mhm.
going to the library in the
No,
Los
actually
Angeles
at
area where you
9,
live.
9.
Sorry?
That was at 9, 9 years old.
Yes, starting at 9, but you did this for your teenage years, right? You would read
Well,
a
I
book
never
a week
stopped.
and
Mhm.
you just kind of absorbed all these metaphysical and spiritual books. And but let's pick up your life story and your spiritual journey from about your teenage years.
So, how can I say it was required at my home. You were excellent and excelled in school, but I could, but I was this voracious reader, and the subject matter drew me so much. So I ended up studying all those sciences and all the theosophies, philosophies, all the religions, everything out there, all the historical features from Blavatsky to Steiner to the original, even to Zoroastrianism at that time, all everything that was out there. And people don't recognize, if I could just say on that, I found out later that the soul we call Jesus, and Casey confirms, and this is going to be hard for some, but those that resonate will understand. When he asked to come back, that first soul that was created as Emilius, he actually came as Zend, and he was the father of Edgar Casey at the time, who was Zarathustra. And he wrote all these things that these tenets we were supposed to live by. And then Casey, as his son, took those tenets and and changed his name to Zoroaster and started the Zoroastrian religion, which today is the last Christian religion that still teaches about reincarnation. But people aren't taught these factors by the powers that be, or shouldn't be. But in my fact, I could tell right away. I was raised with the academic family, so I was skeptical. So anything you hear me say, I like a lot of proof. So I would study and study, and I wouldn't say anything for about 5 years until it would continue. So by high school, yes, I was doing telekinesis because it was fun, because I knew you had all these energies. And I was already seeing things psychically and doing all those things since I was about 5 when I recognized the differences. And the kids just called it at my school, Antonia has the powers of concentration. And so, at study hall, we were like little egghead kids at this school. So what was interesting was at study hall, we just went to have, it was like our social hour. We didn't have social media. And so we'd go up there, and those kids that knew that I could do this would talk to the kids that didn't know. And so I could, I would roll things like I'd take a coin, a quarter, a nickel, or a dime, and I'd say, which way would you like to roll forward, roll backward, fall on the left side, fall on the right? And so I would just concentrate and do it. I didn't know for months that this was going on. I was just having fun doing it. I did not realize that the kids that knew I could were bringing up skeptical kids, and they were betting, and they were making money.
They were making money.
I didn't get any, but yeah, they'd win the bet and they walk off. And I thought, oh boy, thanks. So I was used. But
Yeah.
the tele
This is so human, isn't it? Right? So human. Doesn't matter like how old you are, right? Oh, there's some people who will look at this. How can we make money off of this, right? Whatever it is, spiritual gifts or
yeah,
whatever. How can we make money off this? Which isn't all bad, but
no,
yeah, it can be. Just a little break from the program to mention a couple of things. Firstly, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm to find more people who would enjoy these interviews. Also, if you're interested in spiritual growth, you might be interested in my series of spiritual books. As a spiritual author and a former band director, I use my little "the band director" trademark in these books because I use music as a metaphor for life and the journey of becoming a musician as a metaphor for our spiritual journey. There are 3 books in the series. The Band Director's Lessons About Life is a book of modern-day parables inspired by events from my teaching career. When you're working with kids, little things naturally come up that we sometimes call teachable moments. Little events when you realize there's a bigger lesson happening right now than the alternate F-sharp fingering on the clarinet that I was trying to teach. I started writing some of these little stories down and turning them into modern-day parables. So, the Band Director's Lessons About Life has 50 little parables. It's a bit like a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Each parable is about 3 pages long. Each begins with a story that happened in school, and then there's a reflection section that draws a spiritual lesson out of the events of the story. That is, it explains the spiritual metaphor. The Band Director's Lessons About Life is easy to read, makes a great gift, and expresses many universal spiritual principles in an easy-to-understand way. If you want to go deeper in your spiritual growth, I've also published a study guide to accompany the Book of Parables. It turns the Band Director's Lessons About Life into a year-long course in spiritual development. You will spend a week on each of the 50 parables. There is a deeper teaching about the meaning of each parable, reflection and discussion questions, especially helpful if you would like to use the study guide in a group setting, and a different meditation for each lesson. The 3rd book in the series is a little book titled The Band Director's Pocket Guide to Spiritual Growth. This little book explains a simple 3-step process to putting your spiritual growth into high gear. You can learn more about all of these 3 books and my other books at my website, www.cominghomespirit.com, because, after all of us are on a spiritual journey back home to God. So that's cominghomespirit.com. You can also go directly to my Shopify page at cominghomespirit.myshopify.com, where you can purchase my books directly from me. I can deliver ebooks and audiobooks anywhere in the world, but at the moment I can only ship paperback books within the continental United States. So if you live in other countries, you will need to purchase my books through Amazon in your own country. If you're enjoying this podcast, I really think you'll enjoy my Band Director series of books as well. Now, back to the program. Can I just ask you a little
Sure,
question?
sure.
Because you mentioned, all of the incredible breadth of your reading in spiritual and metaphysical books and stuff. And you mentioned Rudolf Steiner. And He's hard to approach. And if I'm not mistaken, he didn't actually write anything himself. All the works that we have from Rudolf Steiner were lectures that he
That's
gave spontaneously that other people took notes and wrote down and kind of transcribed later. Is there is there any book anywhere that kind of pulls together the teachings and the understanding of Rudolf Steiner that's not quite so hard to read?
they say that about Casey's material, which is interesting.
Oh, it is.
What I noticed was
Casey's material is hard to you gotta go through it very slowly. It's, the language that these entities used is quite old, right? And it was sort of the Elizabethan English, the King James version of the Bible English with the these and the thous and all that kind of stuff, and long sentences with multiple clauses, and it's awkward for our modern style of writing and reading to wade through that. It is difficult.
what I found between the 2 of them, after studying everybody else too and their histories, I found that Casey stood heads and, above and crowns above them all for the material,
Oh,
even past Steiner's work. And so what I noticed with Casey's material in any book, it would take like a first chapter in your brain, kind of what the heck? Maybe the second, some to the third. But then all of a sudden there's a breakthrough in your brain and then something happens and you can whish through the books. And so that's key. And so whether you start studying Paramahansa Yogananda's work or whoever it is, how can I say it? You you allow yourself on the soul level to open to the material, and I noticed that that would magically unfold. And then, of course,
yes.
the studies and everything else, I noticed that everywhere I went for these studies, I already had more research and material than they were offering or teaching, but
Yeah.
that's okay. We never stop growing, and we continue the learning to the last draw of breath, as I mentioned. But I remember, when I started to do psychic readings, I was gonna be a doctor. Everybody knew from my school since I was a kid, the teachers, everybody just knew, but I didn't realize till later in life, like, I was 23, I think I had my first reading, that apparently I was a famous doctor already in past life. You can't repeat. If you already did it and excelled, it's a wasted
They're
life.
done that, got the T-shirt, you gotta be
Bingo.
something else this life.
You got it. And then I realized, ugh. And so I started doing, the psychic readings for people, and I wanted proof because it's someone's life. And it was before the trends and all that stuff years ago. I was 20, 23, and I said, "I've gotta have more proof. This is somebody come on, I can study and learn and get all these degrees, all big deal. I want proof." And so sure enough, it happened. I would see and hear the person's guide, just their guardian angel. I was shocked because I learned after listening that they know the person so much better than I. It's so much easier. So I just have to pay good, humble, rapt attention. Attention. Don't judge. Don't edit. I learned you don't edit when that person's guide says something. And then they would show me details about the person's life in a scene that I am to describe to the person, and then I'm always confirming it with astrology, tarot, numerology, palmistry, graphology, all those sciences that is an adjunct to those things, but only as a third point of reference. The first is what the divine is offering. And so I recognize that it's so much easier. Just pay attention to what they're saying. I don't know these people. So they ended up calling me, in LA and all that good stuff, celebrity psychic, psychic to the stars, and the psychic psychic. And I thought that was the funniest because I would have 20 calls a day for appointments. Half of them would be from other psychics that wanted their readings. And see, in LA, there's a psychic on every other corner. So it's, you have to, and I always said, I thought, God, if you want me to do this, just guide those souls to the table that you have information for. And so some of the places I would go, the other psychics would be tapping their tables a little upset because there would be an hour-long wait of a whole long line, at least an hour, hour and a half for me. They wouldn't go to but because I asked before I would go in, "Please guide me." Like I said, guide those souls to the table. And so it was interesting to see that amalgam of people coming and they were guided. I thought that was very interesting. And then I had clients all over the world already because they would move away and couldn't find the same accuracy level. And so I've only met 20% of them. So I was doing it by phone before it was popular because they would move out of the country or out of the other parts of the country. And I have a high referral base, and This is what they say, okay? And that high referral base comes because of the level of accuracy. So I'm highly respected with what I do. And unfortunately, I get those letters from people from time to time. You told me this 17 years ago and everything you said happened. I should have listened to you. You were right. And I think, oh, poor baby. I detach once I give the reading. That person's free will I have to respect. So
Yes.
I would hope that they would listen, but, human nature. So they can or cannot. But I've seen a lot achieve a lot from their lives and then others. So, but all of
So
us.
you didn't go into medicine, you didn't become a medical doctor. In your early 20s, you went into being a psychic. Tell us a little bit about kind of the beginning of your career as
Sure.
a psychic in Los Angeles.
Well, I was a divorced single mother on top of it in an expensive city, so I had to work 2 and 3 jobs, but this kept coming up. People would ask, and I would be doing readings for ending up they'd find out, for the upper management tier. And I remember, how can I say, one girl, a seminary student, got upset. She came railing at me one morning saying, "Don't you understand they're just using you for your gift? That's a gift from the divine." And I've been doing it for years. I thought, God, if I'm not doing this properly, I think I am. Show me. And so that's when I was shown in a very highly unusual way, oh, that I was doing correct. I was doing it correctly. At that time, I was so upset because she lambasted me for loudly in the hall. And it was a busy, 6 elevators, 3 on each side, people coming in that morning. And I'm thinking, oh my God, she's just so upset. Not that I had the gift, a gift of God, gift of prophecy or whatever, but that she thought the people were using me for it.
Hmm.
And so I went home that day and I thought, oh God, show me. I need to. So I went home and I thought maybe the astrology today is off. Let me go get the little, community paper with the astrology section in. And what the heck? And they had an interesting story. They said the astrologer's on vacation this week, but instead we have an article about Dr. Robert G. Temple and his book, The Serious Mystery. And so I said, wow, what's this all about? That's nice.
Hmm.
Okay, it's about this tribe in Africa that knew about these extraterrestrials for thousands of years that taught these truths of initiation. I thought, okay, all right, that's nice. And I couldn't sleep. I was so annoyed by her and hurt by her intensity. She was so angry. And that night, as I tried to sleep, I couldn't. And all of a sudden, on the right side of the bed, a man appeared in a blue suit, navy blue dark suit, his hands folded, wire rimmed glasses, hair on the sides, a little on the top. And he said, "The ARE needs you." And I thought, what? He said, "The ARE needs you." And I thought, thank you. And I was doing white light, red roses, protect me. And I heard a chorus of voices say, "Now, Antonia, will we ever bring anything negative around you?" And then I realized, okay, calm it down. On the left side of the bed was a gentleman with a giant smile that never quit, almost like the one you just had. He just kept smiling. And he was in a Japanese kimono with a band that had the Japanese sun on it and a big bouquet of flowers for me, but he never spoke. He just had this big grin on the other side. And I'm like, what the heck? I just want to get some sleep. And I thought, "Okay, thanks. Okay." And this guy in the navy blue suit said it 3 times, the air and the "Okay, fine, thank you." And so I thought, "Phew, let me just go into deep sleep." So I did. And during that dream time, I saw myself on the ocean, and it was a huge raft, but flat, and it had a pillar on either side and little flags on either side of a language. I think I was wearing a blue, could have been orange, but it was a blue robe and blue symbols on the line. And then all of a sudden, I saw another raft across the ocean, and it was the girl that had told me off that day before. And she was on a raft, different color clothes, and we spoke different language. And I waved to her, smiled, and she saw me and she smiled, and my raft just took off way faster, and I couldn't see her anymore. Mine just flew through the sea, the ocean. And I thought, and I just waved, couldn't see her anymore. And then they said, each one, Antonia, I heard the chorus of voices say, learns at their own level. You see, she only knows truth from the one side, or the one direction, or one dimension. But you, Antonia, know truth from the second, third, fourth, and soon you will see, like we do, from the fifth dimension. They put me in front of the Washington Monument, the obelisk, and they showed
Yeah.
me her down in the front on the first side, And then I could see from all four sides plus from the top. They said, not to worry, all in their own time, Antonia. And then they said, like a man cannot see behind the bend at night when he's on the river rowing his canoe. And they put me in the back of the canoe. And I'm thinking, okay, we don't see anything but the dark. And they pull me out of the canoe and they said, but you can see. And they show me around the bend was this little town that was all brilliantly lit up that he hadn't even seen yet. They said, not to worry, all in their own right time. Well, that would be fine. I thought, okay, great dream. But I always like to get into work early. Um, so I'm about an hour early and I'm sitting there, and one of the ladies comes half hour early. She's vice president's secretary. And she says, Antonia, I know you're into that, meditation and stuff. Well, this just came in the mail and it's for the previous, occupant. But if you want it, just cross out his name and, you can use it or not, or just throw it in the trash. I looked at the envelope and I screamed. It said the ARE. And I just said, and she said, what's wrong? I said, nothing. Do you have a stamp? She went in her office, got a stamp. I crossed out the guy's name. It was for a 3-month free trial membership to the ARE. I'd never heard in all my studies and everything about Casey or the ARE. And I'm thinking, what? So that
Really? At this point in all of your metaphysical
all of
studies, you
that,
had not
it's
come across Edgar
all the way,
Casey?
yes, in history, not him. It was always the voice. It was the craziest thing. So sure enough, at lunch, we had a 45-minute lunch. I thought I was running out of the book that I read. I was their receptionist, and we'd get like 1,000 calls a day, but all at once, 100 at once. You'd have to go. But I couldn't sit there in the downtime and not study. So I thought, let me go run and get a book. And so I ran to the bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard, Crown Books, and they had a turnstile. That's the only way you could get out because I guess people were nipping books. But so I looked in each section, astrology, all these sections, metaphysics and all this, everything, nothing. I'm thinking, darn it, I have to go back and sit all afternoon. It'll drive me crazy. I have to have, I have to keep researching. And so sure enough, I'm waiting and at the turnstile, someone was finishing their cash out. They were paying for their purchase. And I have to wait my turn to get through the turnstile. And all of a sudden, they make me look up to the shelves right behind the cashier, 2 shelves. At the very top, in the wrong section, the book, The Serious Mystery by Dr. Robert G. Temple. So I couldn't believe it. I thought, that one. I grabbed it, paid for it, quickly ran and parked in time to punch in on time, slammed it right on the desk, and it opened to a page that was actually a picture of the diagram that the tribe in Africa had drawn about the truth. It was 4 obelisks, and then you take an initiation for the 5th to understand the truth. And they had different, like the shaman, I guess, would take the people in to teach them on a spiritual level. But they had been taught by our alien brothers and sisters that all this knowledge thousands of years ago, and scientists had just found out that Sirius existed in 1976. So this is what was
Is it that late?
yes, they had no clue it existed. 71 to 76, somewhere
Oh,
in there.
because ancient people
That's
knew
correct.
knew it existed.
That's
And
right.
Sirius is a cluster, right? 7
Part of the
7 stars.
yeah, so there's Sirius A and Sirius B, and Casey says that benevolent souls come, or not always, but come through Arcturus, which is the most spiritualized civilization in the multiverse with 8 dimensions, and they come through either Arcturus or Sirius prior to Earth's major Earth changes to help humankind get ready spiritually, mentally, and physically for these changes, and afterwards to get them back on track again. And I thought, okay. So ultimately, we have to understand the beings throughout the multiverse that God created have been here longer than humans. Casey confirms that we've been here through the archangelic realm 12.5 million years. People I know have that incorrect, but that's how long we've been here. But the Earth has been
Humans.
humans.
Human.
But the Earth has been here 4.5 billion years. And so she's had a lot of visits, and we are souls that come to Earth school. So we're not this body. So people get hung up. But it's important that people understand that this is where we put all the education from this solar system and others into use to raise the human evolution back to where it should be, that collective understanding of the oneness or connection to God Creator. we've had a little
Right.
trouble with that. So so ultimately from those early ages, but I think I've been doing readings for about 20 years, and I got from the ARE, they had a great report, your past life report and your karmic report. Those are the best. People can order those online if they choose through Edgar Casey Foundation. But it was
And
interesting.
that's based on those are astrological reports, basically, right? Based on your date and place of birth and
And
time,
that
right?
accuracy, God created everything has a time, a season, is a reason, and that was really so when you use astrology the way Casey came through the readings, it has a spiritual connotation in the highest way, not like for your weekly, "What am I gonna do today?" It's not for that,
Yeah.
but it shows you your opportunities, and you can either not choose to use them or apply them in the highest ways. But what was interesting was they, how can I say it, from that use of Casey talking about it and everybody else, I use spiritual astrology in the highest ways for my clients or whatever, as well as all the other psychic, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairgustient, the long list of clairs I call them gift. But that
Right.
one was interesting because it's a spiritual focus on what God intended it to be used for from the Babylonian times and prior. So, and all the ET brothers and sisters have been using star and star maps forever anyway. They impel us, they affect us. Those energetic fields always affect us. So it was interesting. I got my little report from them and I read it on the first page. It said, "You did not incarnate for several hundred years, instead, studying divine universal law. And so in this lifetime, you promise to incarnate to use your psychic ability to help the soul growth of many others." I dropped it on the floor. Because remember, I was gonna be a doctor since I was 5. Come on, I was like, miss I was given all the biology tests and everything. But it was just crazy because I thought, so it was intended in the highest use. And unfortunately, it's not like the storefront gypsies you see out there. So people need to be referred or guided in the highest way because there's a lot of charlatans, unfortunately, out there.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's been an interesting focus to you. So, how can I say it? My studies, I've always taught, not just use their readings or whatever. But if I'm learning something, that knowledge is imperative. That someone else that may resonate, that's ready for the knowledge, have it too, so we can lift the collective. That's key. The collective has to raise.
Right.
So it's in everything I do in my life, it's to stay connected to the divine. I have 2 hours of God time at night, 2 hours of God time in the morning, so I can stay connected. Meditation. Casey tells us that we should at least have 10 to 15 minutes a day of meditation on a daily basis. He says, heck, a minute, half a minute is better than none. So we stay connected. Prayers when we beg or complain to God or thank God for something. But
Sometimes say we get our prayers are giving God our shopping list, right? Like God is our servant, do this, do that, bring me this, take that away, Yeah, God's not your errand boy. That's kind of not how this relationship works.
Like, so that's nice. It'll get you. That's nice. What be thankful and grateful. But meditation is when you listen to the divine,
Yeah.
and that's what most people don't take the time to do. They'll take the time to get dressed, shower, shave, get ready, but they won't take the time to listen to the divine. I'm thinking, what are you doing? So I do know that the guides, your guardian angel, loves you more than anybody ever will, like God does, and that we're supposed to learn that premise of true love, unconditional love, and that's hard for humans. And so that's with no judgment and it has to be unconditional. You don't force, you don't push. And so it's an interesting concept when we actually embrace what, humankind has had a hard time learning for 12.5 million years. So if they could just learn to be, you know,
We're slow learners.
oh, sweet but
We
slow, I call it. Sweet but
yeah,
slow.
we frequently regress, right? That's we go backward. Just like the Mercury retrograde we just came through. Humanity has retrograde movements quite regularly.
I see it in my work if I do an astrology connection to a person. You can see that their past lives where they over and over with this same lesson. So I try, if they ask, I go through that detail in detail so they could learn how what they promised to do this lifetime, because so they won't repeat, because it messes up the rest of the collective. We're all supposed to evolve, not just one of us or two of us, all of us. So around the world, Oh, you should have seen when I would do readings for, like, an Arab person would come in, and you could tell that they were very strict and did not like Jews. Okay. So I have to do a reading, and I would see right away the guides would show me that they were Jewish in the past life. And
Yeah.
so I would look and I would think the hatred was so bad on that side that they had to come back the opposite, and they still had that unnecessary hatred or the wrong perspective. And I would
Yeah.
have the same thing with a Jewish person. They'd come and they were just against Arabic, anything. And all of a sudden the guides would show me that this person was Arabic, in past life, even though Jewish. So I realized they don't even have a clue. They've been everything. So it's kind of interesting to see. The people have to understand we have to go through these gradients of male, female, yes, only two genders. And we're confused. So, but what happens is they
Yeah.
promise.
Confusion is not one of the two.
Exactly, exactly. They promise at some point, maybe not this life, but another life, where they'd align with that energetic maleness or energetic femaleness fully and integrate it inside. You're supposed to learn to be male on the exterior and female in your thinking, intuitive, or the opposite, female on your exterior and male on the thinking, and then the balance is set. But you know how people are; it takes a while. So,
Yeah. Oh,
and God loves us a lot. He says, "Come on at your own pace. You can try, So one day they'll correct it on their own in their own ways. And that's what we hope. That's the best.
yeah. So you have had a full life of psychic readings that still goes on. You're still doing readings, and maybe share with us the insights that you were given that caused you to leave the Los Angeles area when that happened, and what you were given. I think
Yeah.
listeners and viewers would find that very interesting.
What I was told was actually the chorus of guides that I always hear since I was a child. They said, "You're going to have to be out of LA no later than March or May 2012." I thought, you better show me. But I had already been studying. I like proof. I'm just like, okay, prove it. But I had
Yeah.
been studying about the major earth changes, which I thought was a myth. I thought, let me discard and get rid of this myth. And so I studied for like 5 years everything I could get on scientific, the way or geological ways or metaphysical spiritual ways, and I found it was real. I thought, "You've gotta be kidding." It was real, and one of the most valid ones was, of course, Casey. And then I realized, "Oh my goodness." So I started to teach and share about the changes we've been through before, as Casey states. It's a normal, natural process. It's a solar systemic cycle of change, not just Earth-centric. And so I was actually guided here because we are in that midst of great change. And I will tell you, when I started to research deeply, when you get your first computer and all that good stuff, I was studying the stats on this. Well, scientists had found for many thousands of years that there were only, 20 to 25 volcanoes that would be active per year, with only one erupting at a time in any given year for thousands, hundreds and thousands of years. And then I watched it actually go to from 20 to 25 to 60, then 90, then 120, 160, 190 earthquake volcanoes around the year with several erupting at the same time. And I thought, wait a minute. So I was actually guided and shown what we needed to do, as we have done before, to not only survive, but thrive and rebuild for generations to come. It's a natural, normal cycle of great change on a spiritual level as well as a physical level and a mental level. We have no time for fear that blocks needed intuition, but we ask to incarnate exactly at this time of great change. The Earth, Mother Earth, is growing in her energetic level and to inspire us to do the same. So, sure enough, I was singing, I guess, this song since I was a little kid, and I heard it once, the Ontario song or something, and I would sing that. And then I
Oh,
recognized
not our Confederation, Ontario.
that one, that one. I would sing it.
Ontario song. I remember singing
That
that in
one.
1967. That was a
Yeah,
long time ago.
yeah. I thought, where is that coming from? But I always knew I wouldn't retire or have an end of life in the Los Angeles or California. I just knew. And so after all the studies and the research, I was actually guided directly. They don't play. When you put your life in their hands, they go, "Now, go, do." And so I still wasn't sure. And so I had packed, and all of a sudden I came back from Shasta. I did a conference as a speaker, and I was with Daniel Brinkley, Dr. Carl and Kalaman, and we were watching this eclipse at Mount Shasta, the group over the weekend. But I was so busy with readings as well as my workshop for these people that about what was happening that I didn't get down for 10 days. And then at that time, I found that I had been the older couple had given back the rent and said, "No, you have to move. We have to move back into that little house. The older house, we're getting too old. We need that one." And so I thought, okay. So I had no choice. So they pushed me right out, but I sold everything, packed up everything. I picked up 64 boxes of books on top of it and to ship and all that. And when I got here, I thought, said to the divine, "Look, you better prove to me this is exactly what I'm supposed to be." So I was actually on the way. I needed a chiropractic adjustment after you sell all your stuff and carry it out to the car off Craigslist. You know
Yes.
how it is. And so someone had informed me about their chiropractor, and they would take me to the event. And all of a sudden, at a stoplight, I heard the guide say, "Turn around, look left now, and turn around and go." And I thought, "You got to stop. You got to turn around. Why? You're going to be late for your appointment." I said, "No, I got to go," like they said. So they dropped me off at the parking lot, and there was a bookstore. Now I had covered the area for 9 months beforehand, and I didn't see this particular. I ran in with my business cards, and I said, "Hi, my name is Antonia Lau. I'm on my way to an appointment, but perhaps next week I could stop by and see you or talk to you. And is your owner here?" Actually. And they said, "No, the owner's next door. She's normally never here, but she just came in 10 minutes ago. Check next door." Went next door, and the lady's face just dropped when I said, "Hi, my name is Antonia Lau." Her mouth just hung open like my mom used to when I was a kid. And so sure enough, she said, "I know you." I said, "Pardon me?" She said, "I know you." It was 3 days after I had asked the guides to prove that I was supposed to make the move. And sure enough, she said, "My sister and I were on the conference that you did last year in the Mexican Riviera on board for 250 people." And I thought, "Oh, okay." It was right around the corner from where I had been shown to live and had sent my monies and everything else, my deposits and all that, and secured a space. This little bookstore was right around the corner. It was a spiritual bookstore. So I thought, this is okay. I trust you. And so, as Casey confirms, everybody on a soul level is told where they're meant to be during these time of great changes if they pay attention to it. The area will change on the world. The whole world map, as it always does, it will change. We find, like the road Bimini underneath Bahamas, and we find beautiful mosaic tiles underneath other coastlines and areas. We find agricultural lands that were underneath, the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. So, what you find now is that you have to be guided not only to survive, but thrive and rebuild if you're on that team. And so my material tends to resonate. So I went through and gave lectures. I keep a free workshop set of lectures, 1 through 12. They can look on these major earth changes and how best to properly prepare. Because I notice people are not paying attention or not preparing properly. So it's a waste of time, energy, or monies. But I want that core group because Casey says he saw ahead. This is the time we finally spiritualize the planet that we had promised 3 times before and did not spiritualize the planet at 3 other cataclysms. And Casey states the last cataclysm prior to the one in process right now was 10,600 BC. The one prior to that was 28,000 BC. The one prior to that was 50,700 BC. He said, and those are the last 3 just before this currently in process. But you do understand, he says, that there were different cultures involved. Now, the ancient ones, the Atlanteans, they were just checking out the sites so they could go to the Pyrenees area and the Basque regions and on to Egypt. Another time they went to the Yucatan Peninsula and then to southeast, what is southeast US, and joined with the Cherokee and all kinds of things. So it's kind of interesting to see that thousands of years we're still going through the process of growth and evolution. And people unfortunately choose to take it as doom and gloom or fear. No, it's prepare. Didn't Noah prepare? He listened.
Yeah.
Everybody laughed at him too. And so what we see is I was asked to speak at the Edgar Casey annual winter retreat in 2020, February 2020, and I was very honored. Um, they put me in the large room after the weekend keynote speaker, the CEO of the company at the time, Kevin Tedeschi, and I brought all my material. But before I present, I always check 2 days before to see the count. In February 2020, there were over 1,500 volcanoes that were active, with several erupting at once. Then I had to do another talk again in 2022 and calculated 2 days before. There were over 2,300 volcanoes currently active, with several erupting. So from the 20 to 25 per year, we blew past that. And this is what happens in the time of great change. So we can all grow, literally. But people, we have to finish our 3D life, what we promise, all that soul growth. And we all promise to leave the world better than when we came. We've got to figure out what that promise was to the divine and get on it. So people will be guided to complete it, to leave it better than when they came. So I'm working to build safe, sustainable communities since 1980s for these changes worldwide, at least 22. And so I was guided to what would work, what will not work, and they showed me exact details that I've been working on since 1999, when I took about 100 different sources around the world of sustainable dwellings. And I found one, so I formed a company. By 2013, I was telling people, more and more people, but I started in 2000. Now we're coming to the point where we can produce these. You can put a whole community up with 4 people, unskilled, over a weekend. Literally, how can I say?
Over a weekend?
Yeah. They go up very quickly, rapidly, without skill, and they come down just as quickly. They last a couple hundred years, can be buried, they float, the whole process. And so this was after my guided research from the guides. They had shown me this in detail. And so I kept working and working and working to get this opportunity to come together for the benefit of the others. Not an egregious reason or monetary reason, but it's to help people in areas of disaster, to make sure we have schools and medical centers as well as community centers, so they can get back to life and continue to rebuild.
Right. So if any of our listeners are interested in this or other work, can you just share? Some people will only be listening. Can you just say verbally a website that people can connect with you if they're interested in your services for psychic readings, or interested in the sustainable community idea, any of that? How should people contact you, Antonia?
They can go to antonialau.org, AntoniaLau.org, and that's my website. They can also go to habitusbuildingsystems.com, HABITUS, buildingsystems.com. But all that information about the changes is on my website, antonialau.org, and they can contact. I also teach quantum bioenergy healing for many decades now. I've been teaching doctors this. It's a method that heals even 4th stage cancer in 4 or 5 1-hour treatments, other diseases in 2 to 3 1-hour treatments, the way Jesus taught the disciples. So you see, the kind of doctoring I do this life is a little different, apparently, from the previous life, but I'm still sharing that knowledge for many others. Because during disasters, hospitals unfortunately become morgues. And that's the issue. So it's to train as many people so they can give effective help and care in those times of need.
That's wonderful. Antonia, it's been, as always, an absolute joy to talk with you, have you on the show. And I know that you have so many stories. Well, all of us do, right?
Yes.
After a whole full life, we collect lots of things, but your stories are certainly very fascinating. We've only scratched the surface of the incredible things that Antonia has in her life and in her experience, and in the vast stores of knowledge within her mind. But we're coming close to an hour, and I think that's long enough for most people to listen. So thank you so much, Antonia. God bless you on your way and into your work, and we'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Thank you. And God bless all, and may we all be guided in the highest ways from this forward moment on. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Antonia. Bye for now.